Rain drenching the mid-Atlantic and northeast at this hour. Students rescued from a school bus in Maryland after it became trapped in rising floodwaters. And overnight, water's also surging into an apartment in Rockville. A 19-year-old killed, at least one person still missing. And later we'll tell you about millions more Americans facing extreme weather from the Gulf Coast to fire out west. NBC's Tom Costello starts us off tonight from Annapolis, Maryland.
Touching down in and around Annapolis, Maryland this afternoon, tornadoes on the ground for many miles after spinning off from Hurricane Ida that slammed Louisiana.
Please make sure you're inside. Please make sure you're in your lowest level of your house.
In downtown Annapolis, power lines and signs ripped down in front of businesses. In nearby neighborhoods, roofs torn off and trees uprooted. Meanwhile, in Frederick, Maryland, flash flooding caught a bus driver off guard. 11 school kids rescued as the bus was submerged. Throughout the day, Ida unleashing blinding lightning and torrential rain on the nation's capital. The D.C. metro area under flood warnings and a tornado watch well into the evening. Overnight, 3 inches of flash rain swamped the region, tearing down trees, flooding intersections, and trapping drivers in their cars. In Rockville, Maryland, hundreds were forced to flee their apartments at 4 a.m. when a swollen river sent a wall of water surging into garden-level apartments as people slept. Police say a 19-year-old man drowned in his apartment, unable to get out.
They are now advising that there may possibly be 2 more adults, and she believes they are underwater.
Firefighters used boats to pull people to safety. In all, 150 people displaced. 1 resident still missing.
These people went through a horrific tale I've had this morning.
Tonight, Ida continues to unleash tornadoes, dumping record amounts of rain as it marches up the eastern seaboard.
All right, and Tom joins us now from a very active scene. Tom, the damage there looks pretty extensive beyond just where you are.
Yeah, on both sides of the street, it extends for blocks. Houses have had their roofs ripped off. As you go down the street, you smell gas in the air from the open gas line breaks. Electrical lines are down. Firefighters and police trying to secure the scene. Amazingly, here, nobody was injured, Tom.
That is incredible. All right, Tom Costello leading us off on that breaking news. Tom, thank you. I want to bring in meteorologist Dylan Dreyer now. She's tracking the extreme weather for us tonight. Dylan, walk us through the next few hours and days.
Hey, Tom, so far the rain has been very, very heavy across Pennsylvania, back into Maryland. That's where we have our flash flood warnings right now because of the flooding potential. We also could see that flooding extend up into New England overnight. We are going to see an additional 5 inches of rain widespread across the Northeast with some storm totals as much as 10 inches of rain. The ground is already saturated, so that is why there is a huge flooding threat through the night. Also a tornado threat up until 10 p.m. tonight for the risk of very strong storms that could produce gusty winds as well, Tom.
All right, we'll keep our eye on that storm. We are also getting new images tonight of the devastation Ida left behind in Louisiana. The crisis there deepening. Residents, including the elderly, in a desperate scramble for basic supplies under that intense heat, and nearly 1 million still without power. Our Miguel Almaguer is there.
Tonight, this is the misery after the mayhem. The lines for basic services, food, fuel, water, and ice, stretching for hours in communities where Ida's devastation is no match for its aftermath.
It's just hard. It's hard for everybody out here.
On a day where sweltering temperatures reach dangerous levels.
It's hot. It's hot. We have people in their 80s and 90s here. It's hot.
St. Martin Manor, a senior community in New Orleans, home to 150, is still in the dark. Disabled residents forced into the lobby as rooms easily top 100 degrees. 74-year-old Joanne Moss suffers from severe asthma. For 3 days, unable to power her breathing machine.
How much longer do you think you can last here?
I can't last. I can't.
Is this life and death for you?
Yes, it is.
Power across Louisiana is still out to roughly 1 million homes and businesses. Today, energy was restored to more than 11,000 in New Orleans, just a fraction of those in dire need. It could be weeks before the mangled, shredded power grid is restored. Today, our Morgan Chesky flew alongside the governor who toured the hardest-hit communities who were on an island and off the grid.
To the folks who are here, they'll be without power for more than a month.
Yeah.
What do you tell them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm not certain that that's going to be true for everyone. We already saw some lights coming back on in New Orleans today. I think the momentum is going to build every day. But there are some places where the infrastructure is so devastating, particularly in Lafourche and Terrebonne Parish.
What do you tell those folks?
Well, we're going to do everything we can to help them.
For a region battered and bruised, the uninhabitable still face the unimaginable. Many coastal homes were swept into the ocean.
Ida made Katrina look like a warm summer breeze. Yeah, I was not anticipating. This is craziness.
Tonight, what's left of some communities, a painstaking reminder of what's gone.
And Miguel, because of what we just saw there in your report, we know the president will visit Louisiana on Friday. But before he arrives, there's troubling new warnings from officials.
Yeah, Tom, at least a dozen people have been hospitalized, including some children, some said to be in critical condition after carbon monoxide poisoning. Too many people without power inside their homes are running those portable gas-run generators far too close to their homes. Tom, back to you.
And those generators are everywhere. All right, Miguel, thank you. In the West tonight, another emergency is unfolding. California's massive Caldor fire. Firefighters are racing to keep the flames away from Lake Tahoe's resort. And tonight, also dealing with a COVID outbreak. Steve Patterson is there.
Tonight, crews bracing for an onslaught of the Caldor fire's seething flames. Now, just a few miles from South Lake Tahoe.
We've not experienced a fire of this magnitude that's this volatile in a long time.
As firefighters scramble to save 34,000 structures in the fire's path, a COVID outbreak is sidelining one strike team, sparking fears that the virus could take even more crews off the front line. And they need all the help they can get. Firefighters are bracing for 45-mile-an-hour wind gusts tonight that could stoke flames just like these. The Caldor fire has destroyed over 200,000 acres, hundreds of homes, and forced the evacuations of more than 53,000.
Got everybody out, but it's heartbreaking. It's just unfortunate.
Ski resorts now using snow blowers to ward off embers in a race to save one of California's iconic destinations.
If you don't believe in science, gotta believe your own eyes. Come here and experience the smash-mouth realities of climate change taking shape in real time.
What are you telling those people as far as they're worried about their homes burning?
Homes can be rebuilt. People's lives can never be brought back.
An all-out effort to protect an oasis under siege. Steve Patterson, NBC News, South Lake Tahoe.
We turn now to another developing story in the West involving Elijah McClain, the young black man who died after a violent encounter with police back in 2019. A Colorado grand jury today indicting 3 police officers and 2 paramedics in McClain's death. We get more now from Gabe Gutierrez.
Give us some more units. We're fighting them.
Tonight, police officers and paramedics in Aurora, Colorado are facing criminal charges after stopping 23-year-old Elijah McClain while he walked home from a convenience store.
We're here today because Elijah McClain is not here, and he should be.
Police had gotten a call about a suspicious man wearing a mask.
I am an introvert.
They restrained him with a carotid hold, and paramedics injected him with a powerful sedative, ketamine.
I can't breathe correctly because...
Now, a 32-count indictment. 2 officers, a former officer, and 2 paramedics each face a count of manslaughter and criminally negligent homicide. 4 of the 5 also face assault charges. McClain's family described him as a kind introvert who played his violin to comfort cats at an animal shelter. They say he often wore a mask to keep warm because of a blood condition.
This is a loud and resounding statement that nobody is above the law.
Right after his death in August of 2019, prosecutors did not charge anyone. For these protesters, but the case drew renewed attention last year following the murder of George Floyd. Some of McClain's last words, "I'm just different," became a rallying cry. Calling that response a hysterical overreaction, today the Aurora Police Union said our officers did nothing wrong. Sadly, Mr. McClain died due to a combination of exertion due to his decision to violently resist arrest and a pre-existing heart condition. But McClain's father wept as he heard the news.
It just means a lot that the people will be held accountable for what they did. And I know my son will be smiling.
Legal experts say that while it's unusual for police officers to face charges in this type of case, it's extremely rare for paramedics to do so. Tom?
Gabe, thank you. In just 60 seconds, the new CDC warning about Labor Day travel and sounding the alarm on Social Security couldn't run out even earlier than expected. Stay with us.
Feeling trapped by your
I'm going to back this up. There's a couple things that I want to discuss to my viewers. First of all, I've been in Aurora, Colorado, and I'm very, very familiar with that area towards how that the police in general have been noted towards being some of the most aggressive police officers in any academy throughout the country. Of course, when you're dealing with that type of people, I don't know, what is it, like a couple million people in that surrounding area that includes Boulder, Colorado Springs, Denver, 2 or 3 other areas there. Whenever you're dealing with that many people, I guess it pays for the police officers to have good sound training in the response towards some unruly person. But I also noticed that if you even got smart with them one time or showed any type of disrespect, that they immediately, before a wink of an eye, got aggressive with their contender that they was dealing with and basically manhandled you very, very quickly. I went to several events, concerts and stuff like that while I was out there. Basically just outdoor events, nothing big. But I was explained to very thoroughly about their plan of action and how that they basically aggressively handled their situations. There's one other area that is just as bad, if not worse, and that would be Albuquerque, New Mexico. Albuquerque, New Mexico is an area that is known to have police brutality. And I guess because whenever you have like 17 or 19 different tribal villages that live in that area, not counting all the people that's come from Mexico and Spain, and the Spaniard people, and plus with them being right there on a major interstate, a corridor coming out of California, coming from the east to the west, and then you got the foot traffic coming out of Colorado, coming out of Old Mexico into New Mexico towards bringing in drugs and etc. I guess without that type of discipline in Albuquerque, they would basically rule the citizens to the point that the outlaws and the lawbreakers would take over that society in that area. That's the first thing I want to talk about. Second thing I want to talk about is what we're experiencing right now on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour level. This particular program started up in Maryland, going up towards Washington, D.C., towards major flooding, tornadoes coming out of the last hurricane that hit down in the Louisiana area. I just got through getting off the telephone a while ago with a brother, a bishop, that come originally from the Cayman Islands, that come to America and become an American citizen, that has a very, very strong heart towards wanting to live according to the holiness of the Bible. He explained to me very, very thoroughly that he's dealing right now with a situation that just materialized within the past 24 hours of an older saint that has passed away that had 20 children, if you can believe that. 20 children, a big family. I think she's in her 90s, but she has passed away over other type of conditions. It wasn't COVID. But because of the family being so big and the family being so separated, there's hostility and violence amongst the family. And he told me that he was going to be preaching out of Psalms 107 pertaining to the blessings as well as the cursings of God. And as we summed up the conversation, and I know this is going to sound a radical or possibly to some cruel. But I explained to him what I would be sure to do is to make sure that there was a police car sitting out in that parking lot the day of the funeral, whenever you used to give your eulogy, and to make sure that there was a police officer in the building that had a full uniform on that could be seen by any and everybody. That way, if there was a commotion or a disturbance during the funeral procession, that maybe they could grasp a hold of it before it got too badly out of hand. And you wouldn't think that we would be facing off on situations like that, especially of a funeral that's supposed to be considered sacred, okay? But keep in mind, they've had over 40,000 air flight incidences this year alone, pertaining to people being 40,000 plus feet above the ground and getting into a knockdown drag out because of somebody spurting off something to somebody else, or somebody coughing on somebody else, or somebody wearing a mask while somebody else didn't have a mask. But anyways, it has gotten so badly with the airline industry to the point that the airline stewardess is now engaged in hand-to-hand combat towards teaching them how to defend themselves in case of an unruly situation. Let's go back to the weather events. Let's go back to the weather events. The event that has happened in New Orleans has everything in the world to do with the people's lifestyle in that area. And it's not just the people's lifestyle in that area that's condemning, not only on a personal level, but on a grand level, pertaining to seeing these harshnesses that's happening in people's lives on a grand scale. But it's also out west, pertaining to the lavish living that they've been living in, and plus all the nudity and the homosexuality that goes on out west, that now Lake Tahoe is basically burning down to the ground pretty close to where the sequoia trees are, the big, long, tall trees. And I hate to see that with the forestry burning like that. That there's actually 2 fires that are substitute of merging. And if the winds are blowing in the right direction, not only is it going to destroy the vast majority of the community up in that area around all these woods, but it's possible that it could actually go down into Las Vegas from Nevada. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but God is allowing for these things to occur on a base-by-base basis, based upon the sorrows that it talks about in the Bible because of our lifestyles. Whenever it talks about go back and do thy first works over again in the first 3 chapters of Revelations, that's just not talking about a perfect union pertaining to the politics of today. That's talking about us, we as a society. And whenever we get so unfocused that we can no longer treat one another like decent human beings, that's whenever God opens up his wrath, regardless whether it's the wrath in Florida pertaining to all the people getting sick, the wrath in the lower part of Mississippi, as well as lower part of Louisiana towards the hurricane that they've been bombarded with again and again and again and again, pertaining to probably a lot of it has to do with their worshiping evil demonic spirits. But if you look at California, it's not just the nudity in California, but it's once more people practicing pertaining to witchcraft, Ouija boards, palm readers, people telling people's fortunes, working with the dark side. It talks about it very, very specifically in the Bible, that once God gets tired of dealing with people, he not only brings a curse to the person, but he brings a curse to their property. He brings a curse to their land. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now that's developing all over this great nation in one form or the other. And instead of these intensities leveling out and getting less, they're actually intensifying, not only in intensity, But they're also intensifying as far as so many of them happening all at one time. People need to hear the cry of God. And they need to understand that God did not intend for mankind to live the way that we've been living. And I know that sounds like a bad news barrier. That I sound like somebody that their son or their daughter just got through being killed in the military, and I'm walking up to their doorstep, fixing to knock on their door and tell them about their loss. I know in people's eyes, the things that I've been talking and telling them about has been disheartening to them. It's been very disheartening to them towards understanding the message coming from the messenger, which is myself, towards all the sin. But let me ask you, which is more disheartening? Listening to somebody like me towards telling you where you're going wrong, or watching the events that's unfolding now, not just on a week-to-week level, not just on a month-to-month level, but are basically unfolding on a day-to-hour level. A day-to-hour level. These events are happening. They're intensifying. And they're not just happening here. You keep in mind that in Russia, they've got one of the biggest fires going on right now towards the permafrost melting, and it being so hot in the forest that their fires up there in Siberia dwarf all our fires together in America. And then if you look at other parts towards Turkey and other parts of the world, it's either being flooded or they're going through massive droughts towards their lakes and their streams drying up. If you look at the bad luck pertaining to what we've just experienced towards a 20-year war, that basically we had to hand the property, the real estate, back over to the very enemies that we went over there to defeat. There's no way that you can say that operation, going all the way back to the Bush era, the 43rd President of the United States, there's no way that you can say that was a successful mission. It's not only unsuccessful in monetary money, it's not only unsuccessful in loss of life, it's not only unsuccessful as far as people being crippled and hurt, but it's unsuccessful as far as having to walk away and hand it back over to the Taliban. Now, does that mean that all our works is in vain? No, I don't think all our works is in vain over in the Middle East, because we did leave a footprint. We left a footprint, we planted a seed, and hopefully because of modern day communications through the internet and satellite and through telephone services and various social media platforms, hopefully the people will rise up and say, well, we don't want no more being ruled by tyranny. And this isn't just that way in the Middle East. This is that way in Honduras. It's that way in Mexico. It's that way in Russia. It's that way in China. All over the world, that the people will want to rise up in forming a democracy and also trying to live out a life that God, our Heavenly Father, the Creator, intended for us to live through the blood and the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. And until we're willing to look at that, analyze that, and accept that, and live by that, things is going to drastically grow worse and worse and worse. Not just with the COVID, not just with the flooding, not just with the fires, not just with the hurricanes, not just with the wars, but with everything in general. And once more, I know this is not what people want to hear, because in their eyes, they're going to look at me towards me being the bad news barrier. Well, this is the very fault that has fallen upon the feet of most ministers, most pastors, most priests, is that they have not taught in their congregations righteousness and holiness according to the Bible. And because we have gotten so out in left field, this is the only way that we can get straightened back up. And God will basically either bring so much misery in our lives that we will listen, we will pay attention, or he'll basically kill us or wish that we was dead. Because I guarantee you, the people that just got through going through what they went through pertaining to the hurricane out in the Louisiana area, first of all, this is not the first bad event that's happened to them again and again and again every year, including Texas, including the problem with all the illegal immigrants that's coming over to the country. But these things are now multiplying on a scale like you wouldn't believe. And if you think that they're suffering now, give them a few more days or a few more weeks, and they'll basically take their suffering out on each other. Same way over in, I think it was Haiti, where they had the major earthquake. I may be wrong about Haiti. It's some little island over there that they had a major earthquake. Whenever things get that drastic, the first thing that human consumption wants to do is blame it on one another rather than blame it on themselves. And it basically gets down to a knockdown, drag-out environment. A barbaric, heathenistic, cruel, insensitive environment. Similar towards what's going on with the airline industries, but intensify it about 1,000-fold whenever it comes to catastrophes on this level that is hitting like this. It will cause emotions. It will cause people to say things. It will cause people to do things. It will cause situations to explode and escalate like you never would believe. Kind of like the bishop that I just got through talking to, hanging up the phone, towards dealing with a woman that's had 22 children. 22 children. Do you realize how many grandchildren and great-grandchildren that she had living whenever she died? And you're going to put all those people under one roof? Oh, yeah. You're going to have a way of governing that situation. And I wouldn't want to be in that situation, but I did tell my brother, even though he is from the islands, that if he needed me for a backup, for a cooler, or somebody just to be there in his presence or watching his back, to give me a call. And he found that to be very, very heartening and sincere, the fact that I would be willing to do that for him. And I wouldn't be willing to do nothing less for him than I would think that he would be willing to do for me if I called upon to him to help me. All these major catastrophes that continue to keep happening, regardless whether it's tornadoes that hit in Nashville or the bomb blowing up Christmas Day in 2020, leading into 2021, towards the January 6th deal that happened in the Capitol, towards now all of this, plus the deal out in Afghanistan, all these are tattletale signs that if we are an intelligent group of people, we need to take these signs and read them for what they are, because it's not getting better, it's actually getting worse. These things are intensifying, and that's the message that I have to say tonight to my viewing audience, providing who they are, because it's got to the point now that people don't even want to observe any of my videos that I put out, in which that's fine. At least I'm planting my seed. I'm leaving my mark, that even though I may be dead and gone, one day, hopefully, somebody will be able to pick up that material and say, you know what? This individual right here was telling us the whole time what was going on, and nobody wanted to pay any attention to him. Going basically through the same characteristics of what went on in the flood of Noah. I'm sure that as the rain kept falling and falling and falling, and their creeks turned into rivers, and their rivers turned into lakes, and eventually the water was submerging over their waist and over their heads, and they was all swimming, and they was beating at the boat saying, let me in, let me in. I'm sure there was somebody that was smart enough to identify that the things that Noah was telling them was authentic, but the things also that Noah was telling them was now too late, because they had basically met their doom. And I continue to put out material after material, regardless whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, social media platforms, in trying to identify and help somebody out there. And if I can only help one, lead one out of their bondages and out of their grief, that's that much more help that I've done to at least one person. But, you know, I've decided that because nobody is willing to give me that center mic, nobody wants to give me that center stage, the best that I can do is like what I'm doing right now, which is basically continually making videos of these horrors that continue to keep happening, these outbreaks that continue to, these catastrophes that continue to keep happening. And hopefully one day I'll run across somebody out there that will pay attention to the things that I'm telling them. This is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking to see this intensifying on this level, and we're basically just now getting into the major fire season out west. It's that bad. We have witnessed fires and fires and fires again and again and again. And, you know, I'll say something to somebody out there in the populated world. I'll say, man, did you hear about them fires? Oh, them fires, we hear them every year. So they've become callous to it, to the point that now it don't even affect them. It's not even alarming to them. It's kind of like somebody getting out here and shooting somebody and killing somebody. It don't even alarm us any longer. They just had a school shooting today up in Salem, North Carolina, that I hadn't seen yet on national TV, and don't know for sure that it will get broadcasted, due to the fact that they're trying to keep this stuff quieted down, hoping that it will go away. It's not going away, friends. It doesn't matter if you advertise it, put it on national or local TV or radio or not. There's so much media here in America that if you was to shut down all of your major international, state medias, the people in this country would still know what's going on the other side of the ridge or the other side of the mountain or the other side of the river. They would still be able to communicate with each other towards identifying these problems. Now, whether or not they want to do anything about these problems is another level. But I explained to this individual that I was talking to towards their lifestyles out there in the San Francisco area where the Golden Gate Bridge is. I explained to him in some of the things that I was witnessing and some of the things that I was seeing, and he just couldn't believe it. He's like, man, I can't believe that they actually do things out there like that. I said, yes. I go, they do things out there that are considered normal, to where if you was over here in the state of Tennessee and you was to function that way, they'd throw you in a mental institution and have you institutionalized. It just tells you how far out of hand that things has become in the western sector of the United States. But it's not just the western sector of the United States. It's also in places like the lower Gulf. It's also in places like Florida. It's also in places like in New York City or Washington, D.C., or even a smaller place like Nashville or Waverly, Tennessee. These things is popping up all over. We're being inundated by hardship after hardship. Mexicans coming over the border, walking away from a 20-year war and handing it back over to the enemy. Somebody out there has to be able to comprehend and see the things that I'm seeing. And somebody out there has to be smart enough to reformulate in utilizing what little bit of sense that we do have in the church sector towards pulling together and trying to get our lives straightened out, to where instead of God cursing our lands, He's blessing our lands. Instead of God cursing our lives, He's blessing our lives. I mean, sometimes the cursings can come because Satan is after you and he's trying to destroy you, because you do have a relationship with God. But most of the time, it's because God has lifted His hand off of you to allow for you to go through what you're going through, because He's trying to teach you something, or He's trying to break you. He's trying to get your attention in some form or fashion. And that's what's happening right now all over the world. And it's really, really sad that so many people to this day still aren't paying attention to the signs. And they're not just a few signs. Like I said, Lake Tahoe is where Bonanza, where they done all that filming of the country show Bonanza, and now it's prestige property out there by that big lake and stuff, not too far from the sequoia trees. It's on the California side, up in the northern part of or mid-north of California, and now these fires are raging, and now people are suffering. And it's not just the fires, it's the floods, it's the diseases, it's the wars, it's the divorces, it's the problems with families, it's the incidences happening up in the airplanes, it's going to funerals and weddings and having to have police officers there to maintain any type of law and order. I mean, this thing has unfolded the way that it's unfolded towards incident after incident after incident. When are they going to understand that these things are real? Let's go back to what went on here with Elijah. I put out a brief thing today to some of my viewers pertaining to the incident that happened with him. I wasn't aware that it was more than one officer. I didn't know that it was 3 officers, and I wasn't aware, well, I was aware that the paramedics had a part towards dosing him up and then wound up killing him, taking his life. But these are just escalating problems, and to think that this occurred in 2019 and it's just now being exposed to the general public the way that it is, it tells you how insensitive that a lot of these departments are towards covering up the mistakes of their police officers pertaining to Black Lives Matter. And it's not just Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, but especially those that's being picked on and abused by law enforcement societies all over this countryside and all over the world. We're going to have to gain back control if we're going to see the true meek inherit this earth. And this violence and all this hostility is not the way to do it. And living in sin, homosexuality and stuff like that is not the way to do it. Now, they passed a thing today in Texas pertaining to outlawing abortions, which is a movement that I think that they're beginning to wake up and realize that they've made some sort of mistake in their state, and the reason why that all the bad luck is befalling upon to them. You're wondering how come Congress isn't intervening. Well, it may be that Congress has opened up its eyes towards realizing all these hardships that's falling upon to the American people, upon to the American society, must have something to do with the very thing that I'm talking about. You keep in mind, it was Congress during Obama's administration that made it legal to recognize same-sex marriage. Since then, we have taken one step forward as a society and 2 steps back, and now you're seeing the realization of that in all these extreme situations that's happening on a national front. And you can call it global warming if you want to, but it's a combine of both. It's not just carbon dioxide that's going up into the atmosphere, but it's our lifestyles. It's how we're treating one another. It's how we're worshiping the Heavenly Father in trueness and in spirit. That's what it's got to do with. And if people ain't willing to accept that and wake up to that and make a change to that, well, then this grief that we're seeing on a day-to-day, everyday occurrence is only going to intensify. Is only going to intensify. And I hate to put it that way as a bad news barrier, but that's the way that it is. Let's go back now and see in these episodes of what's going on presently with the situation over in Afghanistan. I think they're in Afghanistan. No, they're at the deadly shooting now that happened in Salem. This is what happened there. And I'm glad it has come on because I want to see what the end results of this was. Please listen.
Expecting a deadly school shooting. It happened this afternoon at Mount Tabor High School in Winston-Salem. Authorities believe one student shot another and then fled. The victim later died. Police say they don't know the shooter's motive just yet. And we're learning more tonight about the Americans still trapped in Afghanistan, desperate to get out, but with little hope as the Taliban forces put their strength on display. Jeff Bennett reports.
Tonight, Tonight, the Taliban parading what it says is some of the billions of dollars worth of American weapons and equipment they now have in their arsenal, as the Biden administration weathers fierce criticism for the Americans left behind when U.S. forces withdrew. Among them, a 3-year-old California boy, an American citizen, trapped with his family in Kabul. And Afghans who helped America's military effort are stuck too. Like the Afghan interpreter who helped rescue then-Senator Biden when he was trapped in Taliban territory on a trip there years ago, now telling the Wall Street Journal, "Mr. President, save me and my family." Tonight, the White House committing to get him out. Of the more than 120,000 mostly Afghans airlifted from the Kabul airport, initial figures suggest just 8,500 were Afghans who helped U.S. military forces. While at the Pentagon today, the Secretary of Defense and the chairman of the Joint Chiefs with a message to veterans who may be struggling to process the tumultuous end to America's longest war.
We are all conflicted with feelings of pain and anger, sorrow and sadness, combined with pride and resilience. Your service mattered and was not in vain.
Meantime, the State Department tonight acknowledging for the first time that the majority of the tens of thousands of Afghans who helped American troops are still stuck in Afghanistan under the Taliban. Tom?
Jeff Bennett with that new reporting tonight. Jeff, thank you. Texas's sweeping new abortion law now in effect. The Supreme Court deciding not to block the measure which bans abortions after 6 weeks. President Biden today slamming the law, calling it a blatant violation of a constitutional right. NBC's Katie Beck reports.
Tonight, outrage in Texas.
It's going to be nearly impossible for folks to access the care that they need.
Protest over what is now the most restrictive abortion law in the country, going into effect after the U.S. Supreme Court did not act on opponents' request to block it.
That was one other thing that me and the brother just got through talking about. We had a long, lengthy conversation about the very thing that women, humanity over here, this side of the lake, and don't get me wrong, I'm not against women, and I think women need to have rights, okay? But they've taken it too far, because abortions was not only supposed to have been over emergency situations on being raped or incest, and now it's got to the point that some of these women have 3 or 4 abortions a year simply because they're jumping in bed with this one and jumping in bed with that one, and they didn't do what was necessary towards removing some organs that causes to have children, or they wasn't taking the right proper precautions pertaining to birth control pills, and that's another reason why that I believe that God is bringing some of the sorrows down upon the society because of our behavior. If you look over across the pond, the way that the Sharia law has treated women over there, towards not giving them absolutely no rights, got to be covered from head to toe, including your face. The only thing that can be shown is your hands and your feet, and most of them wearing sandals. Poor people. If you look at the extreme bad behavior that's going on over there versus the extreme bad behavior that's going on over here on this side of the pond, pertaining to women basically walking around nude, tempting men, and then charging them if the man looks at them in the least desirable way, even though they have provoked this by the way that they dress and the way that they act. We're just as bad on this side as they are on that side whenever it comes to these extremes. God turned his back on that group of people over there in the Middle East many, many, many years ago because of their denial of the teachings of Christ and still trying to foment or pursue this Sharia law, which is nothing more than the pits of hell coming out of Satan. These are the things that the Saudi Arabians find to be sacred. That's the reason why that they took away most communications in their country towards nobody being allowed to have any type of internet service, any type of social media platforms. It's because they want to protect that theology that has dominated that whole region now for not just a few years, not just a few decades, but for thousands of years. That was the very thing that Jesus was trying to teach them to get out of. And instead of them getting out of it, they've actually went further into it. And now they're at one another's throats. And whenever I say one another's throats, I'm not talking about 40,000 incidences up 40,000 feet up in the air pertaining to knock down, drag out, as far as people hitting one another because they wasn't wearing a mask, or somebody touched somebody, or somebody coughed on somebody. I'm talking about out and out bloodshed over there. And to think that their religion validates a movement by the holy righteous God, that if you cannot convert somebody, that God gives you the privilege of killing them people. And if you get killed during the time that you're trying to convert them, you automatically go to heaven and live with Allah and drink all the wine and live with 99 virgins. For that ideology to have ever even got as far as it has today is only by the works of the devil. So whenever they look at us and call us the great Satan, towards accusing us of being nothing more than blasphemers or reprobates, I can do the same thing towards turning the ball around or the tables around and saying, no, it's not just our behavior, but it's y'all's too as well. And of course, it ain't just with the Middle Easterners. It's with the people over in India. It's with the people over in Africa. It's with the people over in Canada. I mean, right now they're fighting some of the biggest fires that they've ever thought about up in Russia, towards the northern area, going up into the northern range. There's problems, regardless whether it's problems in China or problems in South America or Cuba or Mexico or Russia. There's problems all over the world. And what I'm seeing is that these problems are intensifying. Not only in size, but in velocity. There's many more of them now that's sprouting up again and again and again. And they're only going to get worse as we get further and further through this thing, because it's the sorrows and the prediction of the Bible towards what it says in the first 3 chapters of Revelations, to pray that you're worthy to escape these things that are going to be fallen upon to the planet, indicating that they will be fallen upon to the planet, or pray that you're worthy to be strong enough to endure these things. That's what the Bible teaches us. Whenever we see these things occurring pertaining to the abomination of desolation, whenever we see these things occurring, that is what one of the main themes in prayer that we are to pray, other than to pray the prayer that Jesus taught us to pray, which is, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Lead us not into temptation, but forgive us of our sins, etc., etc., etc. But deliver us from this evil. That is the main theme. In addition to the theme that I'm telling you about, that it teaches to pray that you're worthy to escape these things or to endure these things, indicating that these things will be fallen upon to the planet. This has gotten serious. I mean, you just seen the Weather Channel that's going on of the same storm that hit down in the lower part of Mississippi and Louisiana, which Mississippi really didn't get hurt by any of it. I just got through talking to a bunch of people that I work for down in Gulfport, Mississippi, and Pass Christian. One of the individuals that I work for, I found out that he wound up hanging himself about 5 years ago because he had a beef with the insurance company down there, and he went into a shop and cut the tires on this insurance adjuster's truck, and they had it on film that basically caused him to lose $1 million case that he had going on with the insurance company, to the point that it drove him, I guess, off into a state of suicide, and he wound up hanging himself. Sad. I knew whenever I was down there working for the guy that he was a sleazeball. I knew that the guy was a dishonest character because of the way that he conducted himself. And plus, after I got through leaving from down there, I found out about a year later he declared bankruptcy on a bunch of his indebtors. But before he did, he went into the shop and gathered up all the frame machines and all the welders and all the paint booths and basically just left the skeleton of a building left there that basically wasn't going to be worth a third of the amount of money of what it should have been worth, pertaining to all the equipment that was in. People are losing their minds. People have gotten desperate. And if you don't believe me, you can see their actions out on the road. And this holiday that we're fixing to walk off into pertaining to Labor Day, my advice to people would be slow down, try to live by the golden rule, which is to treat others the way you want to be treated, and remember that no matter how bad the situation may be, you need to sit back and take a deep breath and try to pursue that situation, whatever situation that it may be, in which I know there are some horrible, horrible situations that can occur in people's lives. But the best thing to do whenever you're going through something like that is to back up, take a deep breath, and try to go at it level-headed. Try to be a level-headed person. You become bigger in that sense than the situation that's being opened up to you. And I know that's hard to do, but that's what we're going to have to do if we're going to be a surviving society.
That I'm about to sign that ensures that the life of every unborn child who has a heartbeat will be saved from the ravages of abortion.
Passed by the legislature in May, it forbids abortion in Texas after cardiac activity is detected, typically around 6 weeks, before many women know they're pregnant. Instead of state officials enforcing the law, it allows individuals to take legal action, permitted to sue any person who might have helped someone get an abortion after 6 weeks. Providers, relatives, even a taxi driver can face damages up to $10,000.
It is a very sad day.
Amy Hagstrom Miller oversees 4 abortion clinics in Texas, which are complying with the new law, already turning large numbers of women away.
These politicians don't hear the anguish from the patients. They don't hear these patients' stories about why they need access to safe abortion today.
Opponents of abortion rights call the new law incredible progress, clearing the way for similar restrictions.
What we hope is in the future is that abortion limits, consensus on abortion will be allowed to make their way into the law.
The Supreme Court could still weigh in on the Texas law. Meanwhile, the justices are set to hear a challenge to Roe v. Wade out of Mississippi, where a new law bans most abortions after 15 weeks. Tom?
Katie, thank you. Now to news that could hit a lot of Americans' wallets. Social Security benefits could be slashed by the year 2034 unless Congress comes up with a fix. A new government report saying COVID unemployment and the recession have taken a massive economic toll on funds available for older Americans and those with disabilities. And when we come back, an exclusive look at what parents are most worried about as kids head back to school.
In 2016, I was working at the Amazon warehouse when my brother passed away. And
what I got to say about the Social Security problems is that if our politicians would have been running America the way that America should have been run, pertaining to old school ways of the way that our ancestors run things, we would not be going through a building nation program throughout the planet towards trying to conform all these other nations into a Western way of life. We would mind our own business to some degree, and we would pay more attention to taking care of our own and building up our own endeavors here in the United States rather than everybody else's. And if you don't believe me, you can look at the example towards the Afghanistan project that now has turned into a calamity towards investing that type of time and money and energy and lives, and then you're going to hand it right back over to the Taliban, is a mockery to those who have sacrificed so much towards the desire or the ideals of trying to conform that country to begin with. The only thing that I can think of that somebody may have sat down and figured out is that if they back up long enough, it's just going to be a matter of time before the Taliban is going to be at war with ISIL or some other terrorist known group over there. And if all hell busts loose, the way that I'm thinking that it's going to bust loose, maybe China, India, Australia, New Zealand, Russia, and all these other countries that could care less about the money and the time and the sacrifices that we was putting into that region, maybe then they'll retreat and say, you know what, maybe we need to all go at this together, rather than just put the monkey off on the United States back. That's the only thing that I can think of is the reasoning in behind backing off. And I heard President Biden's speech, and his speech was a good speech pertaining to we had two choices. We could either retreat the way that we did, basically like a dog with his tail tucked between his legs, or we could have continued to have lost hundreds and thousands of more men and women in an ongoing battle throughout another generation or two that ultimately did not see no light at the end of the tunnel. Well, once more, whenever you go about things in the wrong way, going back into the Reagan era and the Bush era, that stirred them all up whenever Saddam Hussein made a threat to Bush, and then Bush goes over there and shows his strong arm the way that he did through Desert Storm and Desert Shield. Whenever you go about things in a negative, wrong way, this is the repercussions of it towards 9/11 occurring and spending trillions of dollars and thousands of lives because you did not handle it properly. As I've said before and I'll say again, you took a left-hand turn whenever you should have took a right. And now I've lived long enough to see it full circle in coming back around, and now because I'm explaining it towards what actually occurred, I get treated like an outcast. I get treated like I told you a while ago towards that person coming and knocking on that door. Ma'am, mister, we hate to tell you, but your son or your daughter is not going to return back to America other than returning back into a box. Towards being a bad news barrier. That's the way society sees me right now over here in the Bible Belt area in the good old USA. Instead of looking at me in a positive way that the Bible talks about, blessed be he who cometh in the name of the Lord, they're still looking at me in a negative way. Cursed is he who cometh in the name of the Lord. Well, the curse now has fallen back onto yourselves. And now the very things that you was trying to achieve has come back and bitten you in some form or fashion, either through your children or your grandchildren or your health or your farms or your churches diminishing over here in America, or all the problems that you're being exposed to on a day-to-day level. Now it's turning full circle, and now you're seeing how much tragedy that it was, going back to the original core, going back to the original 9 tapes that wind up at the White House at the feet of the officials as Ronald Reagan was walking out of power on his 8-year term. Now you're seeing the repercussion of all these things. It's sad. It's really sad, because we could have been a prosperous, peaceful nation living with the rest of the nations throughout the planet in a prosperous form, and we wouldn't have to been putting up with all these things and all these occurrences and floods and fires and COVID and wars and all this endless bad stuff that continues to keep bombarding us day in and day out. It's sad. It's really sad. I can't do nothing about it other than pray about it and do like I'm doing right now, continue to make more and more films and put it out there on my YouTube platform, and hopefully one day somebody will get a hold of it and understand that the things that I was teaching and preaching and telling people about was in fact the gospel. That's about the only thing that I can do as of right now, because I don't have that strong following. I don't have that strong support team. I don't have that congregation that's standing with the Windmill Ministries, rooting me on and saying, Juby, we're with you, we support you, we back you, man. We're with you, dude. I don't have that support. And because I don't have that support, I'm still just as limited today as what I was whenever I first started this endeavor in 1989. The only difference is now more people knows about me pertaining to social media platform and pertaining to the extreme events that I've had to relentlessly go through of the consequences of people trying to stop me or shut me down or destroy me. That's the only difference. It's sad. It's sad, and I can put it in a nutshell and hand it to you all in one bucket load. And if I do grab it up and shake it out, guess what's going to happen? They're all going to come out the same. That's where we are as a society.
Your appointment today and receive free sedation.
Welcome back. The CDC has a new warning telling Americans to avoid travel this holiday weekend if you're not vaccinated. Their message, an effort to slow the spread of the Delta variant, vital as students head back to school. In tonight's Kids Under Pressure, Kate Snow has an exclusive look at how parents feel about their kids returning to the classroom.
You ready? Up before dawn, Crystal Reed's 12-year-old Tyler just started 7th grade. Are you feeling at all anxious?
I'm absolutely feeling anxious.
But after a virtual year, her son is happy to be back with his friends.
Have a good day, bud. Love you. 5.5 weeks in, he's got 5 A's and a B. He's a solid kid who has a lot of confidence.
Do you have any fear that the school situation might change?
Oh, I absolutely have fear that the school situation will change.
She's not alone.
My primary concern is my daughter, who's fully vaccinated, catching it from another child who's not, and passing it on to us.
The PTA held listening sessions all summer, and a new survey by the PTA and CDC shared exclusively with NBC News finds parents' top concerns are children contracting COVID at school and getting sick or infecting a family member, followed by COVID disrupting learning again.
There's no substitute for in-person learning when done well and when done safely.
Education Secretary and father of 2 teens, Miguel Cardona.
Do you think it's likely in this school year that most schools will have to go back to virtual learning?
I don't think it's likely that most schools will have to go back to virtual. I think it's more likely in places that are not using the mitigation strategies that work.
The survey found only about a quarter of parents felt very comfortable sending their kids in person, with Black or Hispanic parents significantly less comfortable. Overall, nearly half preferred hybrid or remote virtual options.
Would you encourage them to rethink that?
I think in-person school is so critical for our children right now, for their emotional health, their mental health, their social health, their academic well-being.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky says she understands the anxiety as the mom of a 12th grader.
My kid is going back, and I think that his school is going to be safe. I really do.
A lot of parents of younger kids under 12 who can't get the vaccine are exceptionally concerned. Should they be?
I think the best thing that we can do to protect our younger children is to get vaccinated ourselves. Then in the school environment, to ensure universal masking, ventilation, cohorting, screening strategies.
Crystal Reed is active with her school's PTA, hopeful this school year will be better than the last. Kate Snow, NBC News.
We thank Kate for that, and when we come back, inspiring America, she lost nearly everything, but not the will to win. One Paralympian's incredible journey to gold.
Certain HPV-related cancers?
You're not welcome here.
Get out of my face.
Speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. Boom. Speed it up, speed it up. Boom.
You get up.
Right.
Where's the people you...
Well, can't find it. Bingo. No, that ain't it either.
Kids and COVID-19, the long-term effects that
Neither. All right. Right there.
their sleeve. And kids and COVID-19, the long-term effects they could experience after getting coronavirus. And a check of your Labor Day weekend forecast. It's all ahead at 6. Inspiring America tonight, the comeback story you haven't heard. U.S. swimmer Morgan Stickney pulling off a stunning win at the Paralympics, overcoming one challenge after another on her way to Tokyo.
She's inching up there.
With one lap to go in the 400-meter freestyle, Morgan Stickney trailing behind. Then, Morgan did what she does best.
And here comes Morgan Stickney.
She fought back.
It will be Morgan Stickney that gets the gold.
Obviously, you saw my face. I was shocked that I hit first.
Growing up, Morgan was one of the country's top young swimmers. But when she was 14, doctors discovered a rare genetic disorder was restricting blood flow to her left leg.
There wasn't anything that they could do besides really amputate it. I would just sob every single night.
Morgan thought her days in the pool were over until she learned about the Paralympics. The spark reignited. She started training for Tokyo. Then, another devastating blow. Doctors discovered the same issue in her right leg.
Ooh.
In October 2019, Morgan became a double amputee.
I didn't think I'd ever swim again. It wasn't even something I was thinking about anymore.
But when the Paralympics were delayed a year, suddenly Morgan had the time she needed to relearn how to swim.
When I got back in the pool, I was like, oh, I am definitely training for the Paralympics.
Still in pain, she trained tethered in a neighbor's pool, adapting to a stroke that didn't depend on her legs. Now, she's a gold medalist.
I could have never imagined this when I was laying in my hospital bed after just losing both of my legs. I'm so grateful to be here and for everyone that's helped me get here.
And we are so grateful to Morgan for sharing that story. What a comeback. That's
members of the leadership team of the Commission
Amen.
from Afghanistan. My family was.
Well, that's the end of that. I want to say thank you for listening and good luck to all of us as we end our program. Shalom and God bless.